Definitely it's not the way. It's not the way. Brothers and sisters, think about it just for a second. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu attaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. O you who believe, fear Allah and be with those who are true to the faith. When you send them to the public schools, are they with people who are true to the faith? Do they fear Allah over there? One of the biggest things in Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about another masjid that some of the hypocrites tried to establish. You know what that masjid is? The name? Masjid Dara. The masjid of harm. Public schools is like that. Really? And again, forgive me if I'm stepping on some toes or some nerves. But I just, out of my care for the ummah and for all of us, I just want you to see things in light of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is not my opinion. The Rasul ﷺ sent people to burn down that masjid. Why? Why? The hypocrites, they said, look, we just want to do what's good. We just want to help out. It's just another place to pray. What's the big deal? Rasul ﷺ knew that they were teaching the wrong thing there. That he didn't want the Muslims to be affected by that. And when you send your children to the public schools, you will never get them committed to the masjid. Never. They will always have their own thing to do. Because in the system today, they teach you how to just care for yourself and be selfish and not to be caring for other people. It's all about academics, there's nothing about character. Allah is totally removed. What do you do, for example, with the theory of evolution? Darwin's theory of evolution. What do you do with that? When the children learn that in school and they tell you mankind came from apes. Well, that contradicts the story in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Adam alayhi salam. So now how do you justify this? How do you teach your children? What do you teach them? I mean, there's direct contradictions. So the first thing after the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is education. Education. And we must exert every effort from preschool to PhD within the Islamic environment. Within the Islamic environment. Brothers and sisters, we have so many Muslims who are teaching in the public schools. They're teaching at the university level. Why can't we bring them in within an Islamic environment? Let's have our own schools. Yes, it's going to require some effort, but nothing is easy. Rasul ﷺ said, حُفَّتِ الْجَنَّةِ بِالْمَكَانِهِ. Paradise is surrounded with hardships, things we don't like to do. So the way to paradise is not going to come by you resting on a sofa. It's not going to come by us relaxing. One time they asked Imam Ahmad, لِمَ لَا تَسْتَرِيحْ يَا Imam? Why don't you rest? He used to work hard. And he said, لَا مُسْتَرَاحَ إِلَّا تَحْتَ شَجَرَةِ طُوبَى. There is no resting until one gets under the tree of Quba. That's, a tree in paradise. I mean, schooling for these children. These children have to feel a sense of commitment to the masjid. Education. The second thing is economics for a Muslim community. We can't depend on donations and zakat alone. Although zakat, if all the Muslims paid it, we wouldn't need to do fundraising. They say, subhanAllah, it's so amazing. One of the non-Muslims did a survey. He took all the Muslims in America. He estimated to about 15 million, 12 to 15 million Muslims in America. There's a non-Muslim now. He says that if all the Muslims paid their zakat, now this is a non-Muslim, okay? He says if all the Muslims paid their zakat, the masjids in America would be bigger than the churches. Now I know some of us, we say, okay, I'm paying my taxes, why do I have to pay zakat? Taxes is for Uncle Sam. Zakat is your obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as part of the pillars of Islam. Even if you pay taxes, you have to pay zakat. So we have to have an economic infrastructure to support the educational infrastructure, which means we have to have businesses. Some of us are businessmen in the community. We may have 7-Elevens, we may have gas stations, we might have restaurants. If you have 5 gas stations, or 4 gas stations, or even 2, give one to the community. Give one to the masjid. There are a lot of brothers and sisters looking for jobs. Employ them. And the masjid, the prophets come to the masjid. Let the masjid own the gas station. Many of our people, from the census that they take every year these days, one of the conclusions they made, the government has made, is that the Muslims are perhaps the most highly educated community in America. The doctors, the engineers, the professionals among Muslims. Okay? Now, if you're a doctor, there are many doctors within our communities. Why not a bunch of doctors get together and say, look, we're going to open up a medical practice, and the profits from that are going to go to the masjid. Each one of us, I'm sure by the time we finish counting the doctors in our community, we might have 10, 15 doctors at least, if not more. And each one says, look, I'm going to donate 5 hours a week or 2 hours a week fi sabilillah. I'm not going to charge. My charge is $200 an hour, but I'm not going to charge, and all the profits go to the masjid. Imagine. We have to have an economic infrastructure. You open a restaurant, open it for the masjid. If you have a business, you're supposed to pay zakat on that. The zakat should come to the masjid. Support the infrastructure. We have to, when it comes to zakat, let's have a zakat foundation. Zakat can be an institution in itself. And the responsibility of that institution is to educate people about zakat through seminars, through workshops, tell people how to figure out how to pay the zakat, and then produce pamphlets, have a fatwa line, all these things, and then have people assigned, that's their responsibility, pay them, as the Quran says, pay them to collect the zakat from everybody in the community. The masjid can appoint people and send people, make it an institution of zakat. So there has to be an economic infrastructure. Another thing that we need in the community is the social services. Social services. There are many brothers and sisters who are struggling. There are sisters who are separated, who have children, have nowhere to turn. Brothers and sisters, many of us who come from the East have a strong family structure. So if you're having a hard time, you can rely on your families. But those of us who have embraced Islam here in America, those brothers and sisters who've embraced Islam here, they have nowhere to turn to. Each one of you must realize this. They can only turn to the masjid. You see, they can't turn to their non-Muslim relatives in many of these situations, because their non-Muslim relatives, parents, brothers, sisters, are livid with them that they became Muslim. And they will taunt them and saying, well, if they're in need, and if they happen to go back to them, they'll say, yes, see, well, where's your God? Well, I thought Allah was so great. Allah made you poor, didn't He? And so on. And we have to realize that. This is where that support for each other comes. And the brothers and sisters, they have their pride. They're not going to come and beg for money. But they're suffering. They're suffering.